I see the red dust clear. High up on the red rock stands the shadow with a spear. Strong beneath my feet. It feeds on the blood. It feeds on the heat. Winds below me, I'm on the heat. Winds around me, has control. The wind is inside me. The rhythm has my
I felt the rock star machinery was getting a hold on me, so I wanted to get out. And the difficult birth of my first kid, Anna, put the whole thing into perspective.
When illusions spin a net, I'm never where I wanna be.
So I spent a lot more time at home, a lot more time with the family. And during all this period, I was still hammering away at the piano. It was at the end of all this that I began getting back into songwriting.
You can keep my things, they come to take me home.
One song on Gabriel's third album was Biko, about Steve Biko, the black leader who died in a South African prison in 1977. It began with a chant sung at Biko's funeral. The song's emphasis on rhythm marked a significant development in Gabriel's music.
I began to think that the traditional rock rhythms were very limiting. But in the Biko song, I took a slow rhythm, which was a hypnotic pattern for me. It went dum 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 da, dum 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 da. And this was very good to work around, and I could set other rhythms against it. It provided a solid structure for me, and I think the rhythm is like the spine of a piece. If you change that, then the body that forms around it is changed as well. So the style of writing, which I was then attracted to put with it, was very different from what I would have done with a normal rock rhythm if that had come from a regular rock pattern on a rhythm box or rock drummer. I think a lot of rock rhythms are built up around 4 and a bar, and a lot of non-European work more on a pulse basis, and they perhaps have different instruments which are like pieces of a jigsaw which form a pattern, a whole, which an individual part cannot provide you with. So, and I think the variation in the range is much more stimulating. In a lot of rock and disco, there's this very heavy, tight bass drum and backbeat from a snare. And this is the foundation for most of the music that you'd hear in a disco, for instance. And yet there are rhythms which are just as exciting to the body, but are just, that create the same sort of responses, but are much more imaginative and open.
Gabriel's work on his new album began with a search for interesting rhythms. When we first visited him at his studio near Bath, he'd already spent many months seeking out and listening to music from all over the world. This included Aborigine, Caribbean and Latin American music, as well as African drumming.
I don't believe that I can play music belonging to another culture. It's just there will be certain key elements which I will steal to start off as a structure for something that I'm working on. And I think if you look at the history of music, you see this process going on continuously. And for me, it's something which sets up a whole series of challenges, and I think is revitalized what I do in my own work. And I have this case here, which has got the entire assembly of various cassettes. And so some will have been from bits heard on the radio, some will have been from bits on records that friends have given me or that I've come across in shops. There was a couple of things which I got my little handheld cassette machine and stuck to the telly. I think there were a couple of World About Us programs, and they had something on Swaziland and Bali, and but I think this was some Ghanaian thing which I stole a rhythm from. This is me picking out a rhythm underneath.
At this point, in the spring of 1981, Gabriel was expecting to have his new record ready for release that autumn. In fact, it would take more than another year of painstaking work to complete the album. It would consume over £122,000 in recording costs, on top of the money, about £100,000, he spent on building and equipping his own studio. We followed Gabriel throughout the recording process. The first step was to see how he brought the sophisticated technology of the studio to bear on his suitcase full of rhythms.
I'm certain the Third World is going to have an increasing influence on our culture, and in music, a very vigorous hybrid will be produced, which is based on this non-European influence and a new technology which is going to get very, very cheap. And this facility will open up a new age of electronic skiffle.
Well, hi there. Right?
Yeah. Initially, when you first come into the studio, it's like walking into another world and a mass of knobs and buttons which are totally foreign. And then as you spend more and more time in the studio, you learn what they all do and how to manipulate them to come up with things which are very different from the noises that first went in there. At this point in the process, much the most important tool for me is this drum machine or the rhythm box. This allows me, with the sound of real drums, to store in computer memory any drum pattern I can conceive of or steal and use this as the basis for my songwriting.
For instance, put one up here in the machine, which has got quite a simple rhythm, but I can use it to illustrate what I do. Now I've got this rhythm set up, I can start, say, adding claps in there. Maybe. That's a bit of a hi-hat.
When I've got my rhythms locked into the drum machine,
I begin improvising normally, and often the rhythm will suggest type of sound that I should use on synth or whatever, and then these ideas will be formed around the rhythm. And the process then is to start developing these ideas and rhythms, which, I mean, there's probably over 100 starting points on this album, and a lot of these get knocked by the wayside, and then the best of these shall then begin developing.
For instance, there's something I'm working on at the moment which is taken from Ethiopian folk music.
And this I found very disturbing. I hope I got it. And it just goes on with these intervals, repeating them endlessly. So I took those intervals and began writing some music around them on pipes, and gradually this rhythm would emerge up underneath it. This is the second rhythm, which has been faded in after we get to the chord change at the end of the first.
Once I've got some of the rhythm and melody ideas, the next thing I have to do is make a rough recording so that I can play this to the musicians who will be arriving very soon to start work with me.
It's spontaneous, I think. And normally I go through this process on my own. On this new album, I've been working with the guy who I'm going to be doing the producing with, called David Lord. 3, 4. It's been very helpful, actually, having another person that I can bounce ideas off.
Quite shortly before the musicians arrive, the songs are very much fragments. What we've been trying to do is piece these fragments together, and in fact have demoed the songs ourselves, just him and me and a rhythm machine, so that really we've got a shape or structure to play the musicians. I think the structure is usually the main problem. All the ideas are there, and it's welding them into the song.
While working on the basic song ideas, Gabriel was also compiling a library of sounds which he might use on the album. For this, he used a computerized instrument called a Fairlight. Any sound can be fed into it, stored, and played back on its keyboard.
Say, if I pick up this mic, for an example, and press S for sample, we can put in the sound, I hope. Over here we have Mummy, the waveform, and it should be up on the keyboard.
I hope to use the Fairlight to give me some of the unusual soundscapes with which I'm going to try and make this record different.
On toe windscreen, take 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. TV smash, take 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Take 2. Bit more force. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just the wind on the pipe is quite nice. Yeah. Where are we? 7 or something?
I get this bastard!
1, 2, 3, 4.
I think we did it!
Oh, it looks good. Yeah, all the sounds on this thing are stored on these floppy disks, and some of these are supplied with the machine. This has a list of all the different sounds available on this floppy disk. So I pull out my phallic symbol here and point it at the appropriate noise. Say this is pet swan, which is a modified swanny whistle. There's a repeat built into it. And the rhythm of the repeat is something which really, really excited me, and I've written a song around the rhythms. So there, I was thinking of a rhythm that would go against it. Dum 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 ba bum ba bum dum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum 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 bum.
At this point, I've only got outline ideas for lyrics. So I use odd sounds and noises from the voice, which I call Gabrielese. I think often that the naked sound of the voice is more emotive without lyrics. And I intend for there to be less lyrics on this album. I'm trying to enlarge what I do with my voice, not through technique, but through just the sounds. I think we all make noises, and particularly when we get involved or emotional about something, the colors and the tones of those noises change. And say in black music, they're all represented. So you get these and guttural noises which are very much built into the rhythms and to the atmosphere of the whole and to the tension and excitement of it. Whereas, say, in opera, you have this very abstracted form of singing through a brilliant technique often, but for me as a listener, it doesn't have the emotional impact that I get when I listen to great soul or blues music. And I think in rock as a whole, there have been many great songs which have had really appalling lyrics, but there have been no great songs which have had appalling music. So I think there is, one, that priority at work, but if you're going to write lyrics, you might as well make them as potent as you can and try and communicate something.
The first ideas for lyrics were jotted down in this book. Jung in Africa drew on the writings of the psychologist Carl Jung.
A friend mentioned to me about Carl Jung's obsession with Africa, and again, there was another book I got hold of, but there is this one scene in which he joins a group of drummers and dancers, and for the first time really loses himself totally and is taken over by what is happening, and has this sort of primordial fear which overwhelms him, and he's so terrified by the thing that he stops the dance and orders the drummers away and has to beg and pay for them to move apart, and that seemed a very powerful example of Jung obviously being a pivotal figure of the mind, actually confronting something in himself which he was afraid of. All I know is that when you get the big scream, it's probably the point at which Jung goes into the dancers and really becomes frightened. And otherwise, I'm still playing around with the lyrics, and the melodies very much improvised at this point.
After Gabriel and David Lloyd had recorded rough versions of about a dozen possible songs, the other musicians started to arrive, and the material was reworked as they added their parts.
I asked Jerry Marotta, the drummer, to come over first so that we could work together on some rhythm ideas. One of the things we've been doing is with this big surdo drum, which I find a lot more interesting, full, and more resonant than the traditional tight sound of a rock bass drum.
I wanted also a chance to work on a one-to-one situation with Jerry, because it's difficult in that I've fallen in love with the drum box.
A machine is a machine, and you can't, it's very hard to program emotion into a machine, if it's possible at all for a machine to create that kind of emotion. And in this case, it's important for me to be, you can feel that emotion, because that's basically what music is all about, is expressing an emotion inside of you. The machine and I split the work 50-50, We both work very hard.
The other musicians come so that we can get the backing tracks recorded. And these are essentially the basic instrumental versions. One method is for each musician to lay down their part separately on a track, and I can have full control to mess around with it later.
The next musician to arrive was bass guitarist Tony Levin.
This is the stick. It's called the stick, and I play it as a bass because I'm the bass player in the band. But it's, you can see it's got a lot of strings. I don't even know how many, lots of strings. And it's different than a regular guitar or bass in that you can play it with just one hand. You just can thump on it. You don't need to pluck it. And I can play parts that I couldn't really play on a four-string instrument. This is... So I like it because I can do unusual things.
The process of adding an instrument to the tape is called overdubbing. And now I've got the bass and drum tracks in this song, San Jacinto. I'm going to use the Fairlight with the sound of the marimba, which I've already recorded inside it. having some problems trying to get the guitar line sorted out, so I've asked the guitarist to try coming up with some original things.
Actually, could we listen? Because the first real heavy bend you did, if we go maybe a minute... If you want to ask the musician to play in a different way, then it's easier to do it piece by piece, because you can examine what everyone is doing. A starts here. Bum, bum, bum. How it'll end up, I can't tell, because ultimately, it'll be musical decisions that decide whose playing is used. And there are already some songs where I hear very little guitar at all.
He's a slow worker, and I think the main problem is he likes to keep every possible option open as long as he can.
Because I always think that tomorrow I will find the way in which it works perfectly. And he's been forcing me to make decisions.
I hope very much to try and interpret his ideas, because I don't really think he needs very many of mine. I think people seem to think they need producers, but I think it's more a liaison between what he wants to get and the technical problems.
Hello.
Okay.
3 dom.
The old drums I'm hearing really...
As long as it's all right in the cans, I'm all right here.
No, get rid of the old drums. No, you haven't.
Do one without the drummer.
If we have hang-ups, what I like to do in order to keep the music fresh is sort out all the problems, get everything sounding good, and then break. Hello.
Yes.
Peter sort of moves at his own speed. So I'm around to play croquet when he wants to play croquet.
Okay, everybody back in there for another take.
We take 2. Are we on set? Yeah. Okay, we're rolling. This is take 2.
Another way of recording the backing tracks is to have all the musicians working together. Sometimes these jams or improvisations will last 15 or 20 minutes, and they're often really good ways to explore a mood or establish a groove.
If you get that real good groove going, you want to keep doing it. And maybe because I'm a bass player, I spend my whole career looking for a groove, trying to get a groove. So once you get it going, you tend to want to go with it.
A flat. Vamping. Until the cue.
The work with the musicians on their drum, bass and guitar parts went on for several weeks. When this part of the process was over, Gabriel had amassed 27 16-minute tapes, over 7 hours of material. There were now different versions of 18 possible songs, several of which were running at over 10 minutes. When the backing tracks had been recorded, Gabriel and Lord worked for 3 months with Larry Fast, a specialist in electronic instruments. They added to and subtracted from the songs, employing all the technology available to play with the sounds already recorded and to search for entirely new sounds.
Some of the records that I enjoy most
have had their own oral world, their own particular sound to them. And I try to create that in what I do. We will try treating sounds to put them in perspective in this picture that we're building up. So, for instance, if you have, say, a fat keyboard sound that you think is occupying too much space and has too much weight and depth to it, I may stick it through something to make it thin and wavy, so that I think personality is the word I would use. Its personality changes.
Electronic instruments, in the way that we've approached them on this album, become totally integrated into the recording process. The way the drums would be processed, or saxophone parts, anything else will at times go through the electronics and then be blended in with newer sonic textures, sound qualities, just expanses of sound.
The mixing process for me is often a case of eliminating material. And say in Rhythm of the Heat, which used to be called Young in Africa, the guitar has been dropped altogether because I thought it was a much too familiar reference point. It worries me sometimes that I'm taking so long over these things, and then at the end I think it doesn't really matter a damn if the end product works.
We've reels and reels, mountains of reels of tryouts and overdubs and different synth lines and different musicians coming in trying things. And actually when you get down to the final mix, very often very little of that is used. But that's the sort of compositional process, really. Some people would go through it before they go to the studio. Most of Peter's work in that direction happens in the studio.
I have here, I think, a very atmospheric sound, and what I'm doing is emptying everything else out of the track at the end of San Jacinto, except for this, because I think it sort of crystallizes a mood better than anything else I've got so far. And this is from one of the scrapyard sounds with the blown drain pipe. But if I put it into a small repetitive sequence, I think it sets up sort of pathos very well.
Gabriel and Lord continued refining the tracks for several months after Fast had left. When the final selection of songs was edited down to the right length, Gabriel added his vocals.
Thick clouds, steam rising, hissing stone on sweat lunch fire. Around me, buffalo roll, sage and bundles rub on skin. Outside, cold air, stand, wait for rising sun. Red paint, eagle feathers, coyote calling, it has begun. Something moving in, I taste it in my mouth and in my heart. It feels like dying slow. Letting go of life.
The lyrics were rewritten and revised many times before they reached their final version.
In San Jacinto, I was trying to get the picture of the clash of cultures between this artificial white world of swimming pools, golf courses, Frank Sinatra, which has been sort of stuck on top of the desert landscape, and then the San Jacinto mountain towers above that, and yet just around the corner are the Indian canyons and the Indian reservations, and the mountain was for them a holy mountain. So there is there this sense of the American Indian and their relationship to the world in which they lived in, the natural elements. And so in San Jacinto, there's the attempt for this one man to find this and to hold on to his line of instinct and not be seduced into this world which increasingly is moving around him.
I hold the line of strength that pulls me through the field. San Jacinto, I hold the line. San Jacinto, poison mind, the darkness take my sight. I hold the line, and the tears roll down my swollen cheek. I think I'm losing it, getting weaker.
I feel often in conversation inarticulate, and if I have time, which I do on lyrics, to go through, hone it down word by word, measure by measure, then I feel I can get exactly what I want.
Time I like is the rush hour, 'cause I like the rush, the pushing of the people. I like it all so much. Such a massive motion, do not know where it goes. I move with the movement and I have the touch. I'm waiting for ignition, I'm looking for a spark. Any chance collision and I light up in the dark. There you stand before me, all that firm and all that hair. What do I dare? I have the touch. I'm only wanting contact. I'm only wanting contact. I'm only wanting contact with you. Shake those hands, shake those hands. Give me the thing I understand. Shake those hands, shake those hands.
Last July, Gabriel played a considerable part in inspiring and organising the World of Music, Arts and Dance Festival, which brought together musicians and dancers from all over the world.
All those introductions.
How you doing?
So before a question, so before a doubt, my hand moves out and I have the touch. I'm only wanting contact.
It was at the festival that he chose to perform his new songs live on stage for the first time.
Only wanting contact with you. Shake those hands, shake those hands. Now understand. Shake those hands, shake those hands, shake hands. To my chin, stroke my hair, scratch my nose, rub my
For Gabriel, live performance is a way of taking his songs a stage further and giving them a new character independent of the way they sound on the record.
I think always in live performance you have the sense of a test, because your work is being required to hold the attention of whoever is out there, and it's a very immediate and real judgment, and you learn also how to project it. I'm not a musician who tries to reproduce a record on stage. For me, it's a separate entity, and I like to look upon a piece of music as a living thing.
Looking out the window, I see the red dust clear. High up on the red rock stands the shadow with the spear. Strong, strong beneath my feet. It feeds on the blood, it feeds on the heat. The rhythm is below me, the rhythm of the heat. The rhythm is around me, the rhythm has control. The rhythm is inside me, the rhythm has my soul. Uncertain, I'm showered with the dust, but the spirit enters into me and I submit to trust. Smash the radio, no outside voices here. Smash the watch, smash the camera, cannot steal away the spirits. The rhythm is around me, the rhythm has control. The rhythm is inside me, the rhythm has my soul.
The completed record was finally released early last month. It rose rapidly to number 6 in the charts and then, just as rapidly, slid down again. The critical reaction was mixed.
Part of it, I know, is straight reaction to the music, and I'm not dodging that, but I think there is a lot to do with fashion. One of the real satisfactions for me with this record is that I'm getting played on black stations in America, and even though in the white press I got some fair slaggings this time, I had a very good review in sort of Black Music magazine, and even though I don't think my music has much in common with main black music, it's still a great for me to feel that the rhythm content is strong enough to get through to black people. There are definitely elements of this album which are progression for me. I want to continue exploring this hybrid between electronic or high-tech and non-European influence. And I think a lot more rock musicians are now working in this area, and there will be a style of music to emerge in the 80s, which I think will be very important and influential.